Cancer Council in New South Wales acknowledges the traditional custodians, both past and present, of the lands on which we live and work. Welcome to you all. My name is Jill Mills and tonight we're going to be talking about men's psychosocial needs. So we just have a bit of housekeeping. So if you have any technical problems, there's in the chat box you'll see on your screen, there's a 1-800 number will pop up. You call that number and someone will help you to dial in or sort out whatever's going on. And we encourage you to use the chat box, ask any questions, share things with each other. If you put any questions in there, we'll try and address them throughout the night. The webinar is being recorded and we will send a link to you. So if you miss anything, don't stress out about it. You'll be able to watch the webinar later. So if at any stage you feel that you need to speak to somebody urgently, please don't hesitate to call a Lifeline counsellor on 13 11 14, which is available 24/7. So let's get started, and I'd like to introduce our panel here tonight. I've got sitting next to me Matt and Ray and Ben. So
hi everybody.
Welcome to you all.
Hey, thank you, Jim.
So I'm going to hand over to Matt now. So I'm going to click on the first slide and there's Matt's name.
That's my name.
And your first slide.
Perfect.
So there you go. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Hi everybody. It's a great privilege to be speaking with you this evening, and what I'd like to do is really give you three key messages. And of course, to do that, I need to give you a little bit of context about my situation. So forgive me if I give you a little bit of colour there, but you'll see that if you understand that context and background, then there might be some thoughts or observations about what happened in my situation that might be good for you, either as someone who has been diagnosed with cancer or someone that's caring for someone who's been diagnosed with cancer. So let me give you a bit of background. On the screen you can see there, my 49th birthday present wasn't wonderful, I would have to say, and my wife and I had a very successful business that we were running together, which brings its own stresses, and then a week after I was diagnosed, our wonderful daughter was diagnosed with cancer as well. So I tell you that because the diagnosis is a pretty tricky thing to get your way through. It can be a shock, and in my particular case, it became very real very quickly. And let me say that if you'd mentioned the phrase psychosocial to me before I got diagnosed, I would have gone, what? I don't understand what you're talking about. But I tell you what, that phrase now is very real for me, and I hope to be able to help you understand that a little bit from my perspective on the way through. You'll notice on that first slide that I really started to think about cancer with a little c, and the first thing I'd like you to sort of think about, because it really helped me, was to make it smaller than it is. In my case, my cancer was quite small, like a pea, and I found it quite easy to get my head around something that small, and so I started to use this phrase, the little c. And look, if you ask me now, you know, over the last 5 years, and yeah, 5 years cancer-free, was it a positive experience? I would say it was. Would I want to go through it again? No, I would not. But it led to a number of healthier choices in my life, and I hope to speak to you about some of those things this evening. So that's a bit of the important context and background. So here's my first sort of area to talk with you about and to give you a couple of things to think about. The first thing is that I found that mates and brothers I mean very close mates, the little c tends to sort them out pretty quickly. Why? Well, you know, in my particular case, the duration of diagnosis, treatment and recovery is very long. It was actually 4 years in my case, and a lot of my mates and very close mates, brothers, found it very difficult to deal with that because they thought it was all going to be dealt with fairly rapidly. You know, modern medicine, it should be happening quickly. 4 years is a lot longer than they were expecting, and so they kind of dropped away a little bit. And also, some of the types of things that were happening to me as part of the treatment, they found really difficult to get their heads around. And so it's almost like a bell curve which is slanted to the left. A lot of people came and saw me to start with, but it kind of dropped away a little bit. And that's okay, because really I found there were a couple of positives about that. The first is that some of them were coming to see me, and the only way they could really deal with what was going on was to sort of bring their stuff into the situation, and that wasn't very helpful. And I found myself saying, hey, really love you like a brother, but I'm doing pretty well, and how about we catch up for a beer when I get out? Because I really didn't want to have to sift through what they were trying to deal with, their stuff as well as my stuff. And some of them took that in a positive way, and some of them took that as a bit of a, you go sort of thing. And I didn't mean it like that, but it was a pretty important self-care thing. And so what happened was, in my particular case, and this is a thing I kind of want to suggest that you have a think about, is that the circle of my mates and brothers became different. I actually think it was opportunity for growth. And the types of mates and brothers I have now is different, but I think I've got a much more enriching set of people in that sort of inner circle for me than I had before. So that one's really about the social thing. So you can see that that phrase psychosocial actually does mean something to me, and that first one there is really about some social issues there that you might well strike in your own situations. My next point's going to be a little bit more around the psycho part. Not psycho as in crazy, but psycho as in psychological. Because I'm 56, no surprises there, or no issue for me telling you my age. And in my generation, particularly as a bloke, we were encouraged, and I think it was a good thing, to try to solve problems yourself. Like, what can you do about that? What are your options? What are you doing about it? And some of the things that happened when I was dealing with the little c were things that I needed help for. Big fatigue. I've got that phrase. I'm a fairly energetic guy. You can see my hands moving, things like that. And I was very fit before I got sick, and I thought I'd be able to carry through that energy and lack of fatigue. I could survive on 5-6 hours sleep a night. No, absolutely not. Big fatigue is what it felt like, and having to close my eyes during the day and taking naps and that sort of thing, and that caused a whole stack of ramifications in terms of what I was supposed to be doing. Now I can't do it. Foggy mind. I remember distinctly trying to use a calculator. And I'd used calculators before I got sick. And I said to my wife in the business, I said, why don't they make a calculator with a plus between the numbers? This is my mind's just gone completely foggy. I don't know how to add two numbers together. And I'm thinking to myself, look, what is going on in my head? I just can't really concentrate clearly like I did before. And that has ramifications of what I'm trying to do. I couldn't do things in the business. I couldn't do things for our customers. I couldn't do things for our staff that I did before because my mind wasn't clear. And the third thing is just sore body. I had surgery. That was my choice. I mentally wanted the thing out. That was the thing that was really important to me. Black and white for me. I just get it out and I'll deal with what happens after that. But boy, does that make your body sore. And that means just doing little things like carrying shopping out of the car, and you've got to say to yourself, you know what? Can't do it. And so you can see up there a little bit of a grur. I found myself going, okay, I got to ask for help. Get over it, Matt. Ask for some help. And if you're a carer, can I just put a thought in your mind just based on my experience? Some days I was really willing to ask for help. Other days it was a real nuisance. So I'm going up and down, and that might mean as a carer you might need to kind of read the body language and some of the nuances of communication, because what I said yesterday is not what I'm now saying. And I've got a point down there about a big focus on self-management. What I'm about to say is not a plug for a particular sport, but I was in a very interesting situation where my surgeon, almost as like an aside, said to me, hey, take up surfing. And this was before I had my procedure. And then he went back and started writing on his desk, and I thought, what was that? Was that a recommendation? Anyway, I thought, well, I'll try, and I did it. And I found that surfing, and I'm assuming many other sports could be similarly like this, are so involving mentally, and we're talking about psychological things here, that you can't really focus on some of the things that are worrying you while you're surfing, because you're simply not going to get any waves, or you're going to put yourself in danger. And what I'm saying is that I found it very useful to have something that helped me manage myself, particularly in relation to fatigue and foggy mind and sore body. And I just happened to choose surfing, and it seemed to tick many of those boxes. So that'd be the second sort of thing I'd suggest to you. Have a think about how you can focus on your own self-management as you go through. And as a carer for someone that's experiencing cancer, what do you think of their self-management? Are they being successful at that? How can you have that conversation with them? So that'd be my second one. My third and last one relates to probably a little bit of both, psychological factors and social factors. And it's about the family, my immediate family in particular. And you remember that, you know, our daughter also had cancer at exactly the same time as I did. Different type, by the way. And when I look at what I was calling little c, it had a massive impact. I've got a picture up there, you know, the stone going into the lake and these circles of great distress and questions and emotion coming out from it. I was really surprised about just how much it affected my immediate family. And I'm going to be positive about it because I think it was, but it did fundamentally change the dynamics in our family. And let me give you a little bit of context and then give you some ideas that might spark some thoughts for you. You know, I really started to pick up that in their heads, they were asking all of these why questions. You know, why is this happening? Why is it happening to Matt? Why is it happening now? What if things don't progress? You know, I thought I'd get to see him growing old and these sort of things. Because I just started to, I guess I just started to notice in our family conversations and so forth that it was a real problem for them, that there weren't answers to these things and it was really stressing them out. And I noticed that, and this is the idea of the circles, that they would then go and try to talk with some of their friends and have similar situations and experiences as I did. Some of their friends were like, oh yeah, okay, let me just listen, you know, it'll be good. You just talk, I'll listen. And others would find that very confronting and saying, wow, I don't really know how to help you with this. I haven't been through this before or experienced it. So we started to get these big circles of sort of distress and questioning and emotions happening. And talking about emotion, I also noticed in our family that there were things that were being said that was very raw. You know, and look, we're all you know, quite well-rounded humans and we use a mix of emotion and logic, but there are sort of social barriers that I found were being broken in our situation. We weren't so respectful or polite because this thing just had to be said. And so the emotion would come, so it was really tiring. It was really frustrating at times because it was just so raw to hear this sort of stuff coming. And I'm sure, absolutely, if my wife was in this room tonight, she would say, yeah, but Matt, you were doing it as well, and that would be true. I would be also very much aware that I was speaking about things in a very raw, emotional way. But it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all negative. And in fact, you know, you see there on the slide that we're now a top-notch unit. We've had some crises in the last 12 months after my 5 years, which, by the way, was a great party. It was a fantastic party, 5 years cancer-free. And what's happened in our family is that we're able to deal with crises in a very particular way now. It almost, I've never been in the army, but it almost feels like we go straight to action stations. We know who does what and how we're going to talk together and how we keep each other up, you know, during this thing. And that's a very positive thing because, you know, life's not easy. But sometimes can be beautiful, as that saying goes. And I think that's positive. And I think it's also positive that we've grown closer as a family unit. We understand each other better in the sense that we heard some things during this time that hadn't been said before, and now we know that that's where that person's coming from. And I found it very enriching, and I still think it's very positive. So my 15 minutes is almost up, and I just wanted to thank you for listening and hope that those sort of three areas might spark some thoughts and some questions, some observations that would be useful to you. So I'll hand back to you, Jill.
Thanks, Matt. We had a question come up from Tracy E. On the screen, and she's saying she's the carer,
yes,
and saying, are you okay? Are you okay? And her question is, how do you offer assistance without offending? Because it gets like, yeah, I'm okay,
Yeah. Look, that's a great question, Tracy. Look, first of all, it's going to depend on the type of personality you're dealing with. Are they fairly open? In which case, just ask them, how are you feeling? I mean, I remember being asked open-ended questions like, how are you feeling, or what are you feeling, was much more useful than are you okay, because I wasn't entirely sure what they meant, but that's just me. So first thing I'd say is just be aware of the type of person. The second thing is we switch on the active listening. I'm sure you will be, Tracy, or have done. Just nod and say, yep, right, and just let us go. because sometimes what we say first up is not actually what we're feeling. It takes a little while before we'll actually say, you know what, disregard the last 5 minutes what I'm talking about. I'm not doing that well at all.
And there was another one there from Craig. When did your 5 years cancer-free begin? From the date of surgery? From the date of diagnosis?
Yes, great point. In my particular case, I am taking the 5 years from diagnosis because the period of time between diagnosis and that first surgery was actually very close. Yeah, didn't have much chance to, what am I going to do? We're going to go and do it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we'll pass the
Absolutely.
microphone to Ray.
Great.
And
Thank you.
thank you, Ray, and thanks for sharing your story.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in, but also thanks to the Cancer Council for putting on this. It's such an important topic.
Absolutely.
Ironically, when I was thinking about this talk, I found myself writing the take-home message first, but I'd correct that slide if I could. My take-home message would be what Matt just said. I loved everything he had to say about that, so thank you for that story. It's just such a wonderful illustration of the roller coaster ride that goes through for everybody. Okay. So the take-home message, all I could think of was to the blokes out there, just be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. You've had a lot to deal with. You've had a lot to deal with. There's been a lot on your plate. There's a lot of adjusting to happen. And there's a term out there called the new normal. And it takes a while to get there. It just takes time. There's no shortcut to it. And I've got a line there that says identify needs and access resource. And when I write identify needs, I think that's almost the hardest part about all of it, because just trying to find the language around putting words to what the hell's going on, to what I'm feeling, because I haven't felt this way before, trying to find some words to put that concern on the table so it can be looked at. That's not an easy thing to do. And when I talk about people trying new strategies, considering, I don't say that lightly, because the people I talk to, the men I talk to have spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years becoming the men that they are. And along the way, consciously or unconsciously, developing the coping strategies they have that get them through. And this thing called cancer comes in and turns it upside down. And it's reasonable to say that some of those coping strategies will get you through and some won't cut it. Yeah. Easy for me to say, but if you can stay open to them, I'd encourage it. And after being, I'm an old social worker, some of you would see that. I'm of the same ilk.
That's a good ilk. It's a great ilk.
And more than content with it. I see men turn it around. I know it can be done. I don't say it's easy. And given everything you've had to put up with, I'd like you to be kind to yourself, because you're doing well to get there. You might still feel like rubbish. You might get up in the morning and your partner or your best friend or whoever it is will see you're still struggling. But I think you're doing well to get to this point. I've got that slide there because we know that living with cancer and post-cancer, the impact is overwhelming and it's comprehensive, and it hits you at all levels, psychological, physical, and the cancer is a bastard. It's persistent. It keeps going. And it hits you at all those levels around sexuality, your social aspects, financial implications. It changes the dynamics in your relationships. You know, I used to be the provider, now I have to be the carer. What is my role in this family? Am I still valuable? And I put it in red because it just changes things. And I'm not sure what words to put around it, but it does make a change. And I thought this was important as well. And it's a little bit psychological, if you like, but it makes a change, and the adjustment takes time. I've had blokes come to me and say, look, Ray, I wake up in the day and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to work that day or not. I don't know what my energy is going to be like. I don't know if I'm going to wake up well.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what size clothes I'm going to fit in, if I've got fluid retention. And it messes with me all the time, the uncertainty. So the adjustment takes place. And the other thing about adjustment is whether you're 1 month, 6 months, 12 months past, there's this conversation that happens, is what's happening to me now reversible? Is it going to improve? Or actually, is this my lot? Should I stop waiting for the change? So, and I don't have a clear answer for that, but that's what we're asking people to manage. It's a lot to deal with. And I put grief and loss up there. And I don't mean in terms of death and dying, although that's part of the conversation. But again, you've lived a life with a certain set of expectations. A cancer comes in and it turns it around. You didn't invite it. You didn't welcome it. You didn't plan for it. And it represents a loss, and not just a loss for your host, but it impacts like this ripple effect through your family and your friends. A lot would like what Matt just
I think it's
saying.
interesting if you can see on the screen there Peter's comment about the family have reached their limit, and this is sort of in line with your slide, the emotions too easily spill over, you know. I have to, and being the male, he's saying I have to manage them
Being the male,
myself,
yep.
but not always very well. So that's...
Not the only one, Peter.
Yeah,
and ditto. And the strong emotions part of it, I've got a slide around the strong emotion. The strong emotions are a normal part. It's a normal reaction. What's abnormal in this is that you have to deal with this at all. That it's been an intrusion in your life.
Right.
The strong emotion is a normal response, and then the next question is, it's on the table, how do we do this in the best way possible? Easy for me to say, not always easy to do though. Nice statement though. Okay, and when I think about men managing this, I think it's a person with you as well, be that your partner, whoever you identify as the key person in your life, they're walking that road with you, because we know from the literature that the partners of patients with cancer, the level of stress they experience is comparable to the patient themselves. The studies show that the adjustment of the partner is closely correlated to the emotional and physical well-being of the patient. So I know that if you're on a roller coaster, so was someone close by you. So, and that just gets to Peter's point before. So if ever there was a time for you to be stressed or upset or have strong emotions, it's now.
Yep.
It's now. It's after the cancer diagnosis. And I can tell you, unless you're working in this field or in psychosocial care, the words social and emotional well-being, it's a new language. And I was saying to the guys outside that I once saw a guy that was from Walker, and he was a shearer, and I'm a boy from Bexley. And I walked in to see him, and I said, I'm the social worker up here. And he looked at me as if I was from Mars, because I'm talking in a language that's psychosocial, and he's talking about the maintenance of sheep and maintenance of rural farming and his family over there. And so it's a different type of language. So people have to adjust not just to the illness, but also the type of dialogue and narrative that goes with it. Anyway, he was a lovely bloke, and we got to know each other after a while. Okay, so I've worked for a long time in this area, and there's some very clever people that I've had the pleasure to work with. One was a guy named Professor Isbista, and we used to debate this because everyone knows about the physical symptomology of cancer. Everyone gets the symptoms. You get your headaches, you get the lethargy, the nausea, fluid retention. Am I going to be sick and sore when I wake up? And invariably, I just see the emotional response to cancer as another symptom. And invariably, if these physical symptoms persist, you're going to see your doctor and try to take the edge off it. However, when I talk to men about the emotional pain, and I make no judgment on this, but invariably their response is around that. I have to be strong, stoic, grin and bear it. I've got to be strong for my family. I've got to try to minimise it and get on with my life because that's what I'm supposed to do. I feel a little bit guilty about it because I can't do the things I used to do. And that's the language. And I'm not minimising that because they're valid coping mechanisms. They're important. And I've got a little knock there because this one clever counsellor came in and did a session for us one day, and he walked into the room, and there are 20 social workers there. We all think we're pretty clever. And he starts knocking on the desk, bastard. And that's like 10 years later. I still remember. He's knocking away. After a few minutes, we all shut up, and all we can hear is the knocking. And his statement was, that's your distress. That's your emotion. That's a thing that sometimes you can bury. Sometimes you can do enough to keep yourself distracted from it. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, or without your knowing, someone's going to trigger it, or if the smallest piece of kindness comes your way, then it comes to the surface. And those strategies are good in terms of coping, but it's addressing that underlying distress. And I don't underestimate how hard it is to identify it and put words to it. But that's the thing I'm trying to talk about in terms of adjustment. And I'll put that up there, just a dictionary, because I see those guys that do the grin and bearing and are stoic about it as the guys that are coping with a difficult situation and they're doing it well. But I get the sense that it takes a lot of energy. And I'd like to try, where possible, to move them into that more peaceful zone around managing it. How do you bring about a change? How do you succeed in accomplishing? And I really can't do it any better than these three guys did. I did a workshop once for the Leukemia Foundation. And 15 or 20 people in the room, and I just so happened to have 3 builders in the room, and they dominated the day, and I had nothing to say. They were the ones that led the day that day. And as you do, you have a workshop, you go around the room, you ask why people came along, who they are, And they identified who they were, and I don't know which one identified themselves first, but we had this builder who was 62, and I worked in bone marrow transplant, and all these three men were post-bone marrow transplant for leukemia. And the 62-year-old started to talk, and he said, transplant 4 years ago, for the first 2 years, I busted my gut to be the man I was, to be the builder that I was, to be the provider that I was. I worked my heart out. I could see his wife still nodding next to him, and she interrupted and said, and then we lost him for 2 years. It wasn't until he stopped trying to be that man that I got my husband back, that I got my father back. And it was a very positive, very powerful statement, and I'm very pleased with it at the session. And then we come around to this 45-year-old builder who's 18 months post-transplant. And he's as frustrated as hell. And the only reason he's at the session, he says, is because his wife dragged him there. And she's dragged him there because she says, I'm not coping.
All right.
And he's working 6 days a week to be the builder that he was, to be the go-to man, the guy that fixed everything, the guy that you could rely on. And so he's listening to this 62-year-old, but he's still determined. And his frustration is that he's working harder than he ever has and doing half as much. And then the last person was this 23-year-old guy with his new fiancée sitting there, and all he can imagine is being a builder. That's all he wants to do is be a builder. So it's lovely to have those three guys in the room at different stages of their cancer journey. And all I could think of when I wrote this talk was this image.
Yeah.
And it says, if you do not change your direction, you will end up where you are going. And all I could think of is that 62-year-old builder finished his transplant, put the cancer behind him, tried to be the man he was, and then decides to let it go. And he's sitting at that table with a degree of peace and contentment, but he had to redefine what was important to him, what his identity was. And I don't underestimate the struggle there. The 45-year-old builder, I feel he's heading in the same direction. And again, I feel like he's got his foot on the accelerator, busting a gut, and another foot on the brake. He's working very hard to almost stand still. And I'm not judging him at all, but I just know it takes a lot of energy. And that's what I think about a guy coping rather than managing. And all I can do is be respectful of that. And I love the fact that, against his better judgment, he's at the table listening to a young bloke talk psychosocial. And his wife is... couldn't be more pleased that this 62-year-old has made that statement anyway.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Anyway, so I'd encourage people with a lot of respect that if you've experienced some emotional pain or distress and you can put it into words, tell someone about it. And I put down there, the timing has to be respectful, because that 45-year-old man taught me that day, if I had tried to say something like that to him, he would have pushed me back and I would have challenged and I would have compromised that relationship. So I have to be respectful of the journey he's got to do. There's no shortcut through it. So the way I made sense of those three builders, I just put it in terms of pain. I felt that the builder, the 62-year-old builder, decided that the pain involved in the fight was just too much in terms of it's a lot easier just to let it go and redefine myself and reconnect. The 45-year-old guy is just the opposite, and I am absolutely respectful. I don't know what it's like to have to change your identity midstream. And the pain involved in letting that go was too much. And the 23-year-old, you know, his wide eyes, couldn't imagine not being a builder. But I knew we had lunch with those two other builders today, and I wanted to sit at the table, but I had no place at that table. All right. And people, you know this already, the coping varies from one person to the next, and I'm very respectful and acknowledging of that. What works for one person is little or no value to anybody else. If it works for you, I'd encourage you to keep it going. And in terms of if you're a carer or someone in their life and you want to try to support, and I heard what Matt said when the mate is trying his best to listen to you and he's not sure what to do next. Yeah. My thought is the unconditional regard that he shows to listen to you.
Yeah.
You know, that is, I can't deliver, I can't change this, but man, I'm going to be on the road with you.
Yep.
And that's what I respect. It's like that 45-year-old builder, I'm not going to turn this around today, but I'm going to be by your side if a window comes up. And maybe his wife created a window that day, I'm not sure. So it's not straightforward. The only thing from this slide in my mind is that wife, she reminded me of the relationship she kept. She said that 45-year-old man is driving her crazy. but she loves that man and she's kept that relationship and the rapport and the communication open enough to get him to that table for him to hear something. And whether it takes it on or not, I'm not sure. And a cleverer social worker than me once said, Ray, my job isn't to drag someone to a session or support him or push him to a session. I'll just stand by his side. And if the window of opportunity arises that he can hear something, I'll take that chance.
Interesting.
Take that chance. Okay, and I speak about that because I know that the research tells me that if we can recognise the need, then appropriate support could be coordinated to address those things. And if you can put it on the table, then those people around you who are involved in your care and support, they have a better opportunity to respond accordingly and with a little bit of insight as well. And the grief and loss stuff, again, I like Peter's statement from before. It's normal to have strong feelings around it. The literature tells us that if individuals have information on the experience of grief, it can help them manage. And that's why I'm touching on it today. And grief, there's nothing logical about it. It's such a tough process. It involves emotions and therefore requires insights and knowledge about what's happening at that psychological level. But I can tell you that the sheriff from Walker, he wasn't going to hear me that first half hour around grief and loss, but it's in the back of my mind. And that first slide about being kind to yourself, the adjustment takes some time. And Pam McGrath, clever social worker up in Queensland, the expression of feelings improves adjustment. The participation in peer support programs can be beneficial for patients with social support. And any number of psychoeducational programs, I know it helps with anxiety and depression. Psychological interventions can help with mood and self-esteem and coping and all those things. But similarly, couple therapy, they've got their benefits. There's lots of strategies out there. But it comes back to people being willing to stand by your side during that journey. And so that's next to the final slide there is around the fact that it takes time to put into words what's actually happening. You haven't had to have that language before. It takes some time. It takes some time to engage and learn new coping skills. I mean, those builders, it took them years to be builders. It's going to take a while to get your head around the concepts of coping and the language that we use. And I think it requires some strength and courage, particularly when you're a bloke that gets things done, to engage in psychosocial counselling. It's a bit of a leap of faith. Absolutely. Like that guy that showed up to that meeting today, it was a leap of faith. Mate, I love my wife, I'm coming.
Yeah.
But I've got other things to do, you know. But I know that these strategies, if you can get there, can lead to some benefits. Finally, that's enough for me. There's a clever man that wrote this years ago. He was a patient of ours, and I've never forgotten it. He was a man that was told by Professor at Vista, Professor of Haematology, he wrote the book, sorry Richard, you got 3 months. 18 months later, Richard was still writing us postcards. So he got to the 3-month point, Richard, and at the 4th month he wrote us his first postcard about where he was holidaying on the north coast of New South Wales. And for every month after that, he wrote us a postcard and James would read it at our ward round. And it was very humbling to see the Professor of Haematology read it out, but it made us understand what people can achieve. And this is what Richard wrote to us at the end there. He said, please think about your lives and try to find some aspects that cause you unwarranted or petty worry, disappointment or stress. Then identify the things you would like to do that really give you satisfaction and pleasure, the people that you love and the people that lift your spirits. Resolve to act on those things as soon as possible because the older you get, the harder it will be to change and the less benefit will result. And if later on you realise that you are enjoying life more and recall today, I can't think of any better way to be remembered. I've always loved that, Richard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry,
Thanks,
hand over
Ray.
to you.
Yeah, good.
Oh, to you. Thank you.
We might just, you can see Grant Freeman up there. He was, I mean, I think you've just given a lot of strategies, and I'm sure Ben will give some more strategies. And I can't quite see the first comment he made, but he was talking about having anxiety and panic and had to give up his job, and now he's studying. And yeah, it's how long is the adjustment period after cancer? Well, I guess it's different for everybody, isn't it? That's the thing. But we'll keep talking about strategies. So, Grant, I hope we continue to answer your question on strategies.
Can I answer that, though? How long is the adjustment period after cancer? I don't think there is
Right.
and into it. It's life-changing, and therefore there's just your life after cancer. Yeah, there's not really an adjustment period.
No,
Would you
you're
agree
right.
with that?
Absolutely. I was going to say, Grant, there's no answer. I thought it was going to be 6 months. It wasn't 6 months. So there's a lot more that goes into the adjustment period than what it looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you're a fundamentally different person.
Absolutely.
Having had the experience.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So
Thank you, Ben.
thanks for having me. I'm Ben. I'm a psychologist from Newcastle, and we talk a lot about psychological issues and psychological health, but often we don't talk about what we really mean. And so what I hope today to do is just give you a few sort of rules of thumb, some practical ideas about what we're talking about, but also what to look out for in yourself, but also maybe in your mates or in your partner, and when it's probably getting outside the normal and you need to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I work in psych-oncology. We have patients with cancer or people who are surviving cancer referred to us, and one of the most common things that gets referred to us, often through patients' wives who say, he's really stressed, he's going to get cancer again.
Yeah.
That's often the wives' worry.
Yeah,
right?
heard that one.
We get referred for stress. And so it's important to think about what stress actually is. Stress itself is important. We're evolved to have stress. We need it. And this graph is just showing you that as stress goes up, so does our performance. Okay, so this is the thing, like, I don't know about you, but when something's due, I suddenly start, my performance on that task or that project suddenly goes up. Yep. Or, when I have to have the house clean before my wife gets home, as the minutes tick down, I get more stress, but suddenly I'm very efficient. As that goes up, that's called good stress or eustress, right? But once we get too stressed, our performance starts dropping again, and that's distress. And that's the bit that we're worried about. That's the bit that we would call clinical distress, or when you need to talk to someone. You need some form of help, some support, or something that's going to change that situation, because distress is dropping your performance and therefore getting in the way of stuff. And stuff is your life, right? So if it's getting in the way of life, it's worth doing something about. But stress itself, just because you have stress, that just means you're alive. That's quite useful. And as I said, it can actually increase your performance. The next most common referral we get is for depression. So I might start at the bottom of this slide, but the idea of diagnosing depression in cancer is a highly contentious issue. And the way you do it and the proper way of doing it has not been solved. And it's been going on since the 80s, this big argument back and forth. And if anyone tells you it's settled, then they're lying or they don't know what they're talking about. So the rule of thumb for you, though, I think, is just inappropriate sadness. If you go to a funeral and everyone's crying and they're all very sad, are they depressed? It's not depression, is it? They're just sad, because that's a sad situation. They have a sad stimulus, if you will, that's making them upset, it's making them sad. That's completely appropriate and not depression. If you wake up in the morning, though, and you're sad about being alive, you're sad about waking up, you're sad about getting out of bed, if you do get out of bed, you're sad about your Weet-Bix, you're sad about the newspaper, those things aren't probably sad. They're not generally sad. Depends on what's in the newspaper, I suppose. But that's what we would call inappropriate sadness. And that's the rule of thumb that is constant even if you have some massive thing in your life like cancer. So that's the thing to look out for in your husband or in your mate or in yourself. If you just think, I'm sad about stuff that isn't really sad and it's sticking around for a few days in a row, that's worth doing something about, okay? But it's important to mention that's a useful rule of thumb, but it's not the fact that you get upset about sad things, such as a threat to your life. If you love your life and that makes you sad that there's a threat to it, that's not depression. That's completely normal. That's appropriate sadness. So don't confuse the two is what I'm getting at. A couple other points about depression is it's independent of severity of illness. So just because someone has a very bad cancer doesn't mean that they're going to have worse depression. And just because someone has easily treated cancer doesn't mean that they're going to have less depression. So don't make assumptions based on their physical illness. And it's already been mentioned that rates of depression in carers is actually slightly higher than rates in the patients themselves. So it's a real serious thing to look out for, both in yourself but also in your family. And one of the commenters mentioned that they have to support their family. That is part of it. You know, you're still alive and kicking. You're part of the family, and part of you is looking after those people you care about. So this is something you've got to look out for in your carers as well. Very quickly, the reason we believe that it can be higher in the carers than the patient, even though they don't have the disease, is because of this susceptibility stress model, meaning that some people are slightly more susceptible to mental illness, and then this massive stress on the family, on the patient of cancer can set it off. All right, moving quickly. Anxiety. So what is anxiety?
Yeah, that makes me anxious.
Yeah. So anxiety is something we are evolved to have. All right. So when we're talking about anxiety in a clinical sense, we talk about anxiety disorders. Anxiety on its own is actually quite natural. So anxiety, quickly, is just thoughts. In that, anxiety is worry and repetitive worry. Worries themselves are just thoughts, and they're a particular type of thought which are self-protective. They're warning thoughts. They're saying, hey, watch out for this, watch out for that. This might happen, and it will be bad for me. That's a self-protective thought. And it's evolutionary. So if you think about cavemen running around who never had the thought, hey, these berries might be poisonous, or this cave might have a bear in it, they eventually all die out. And so we're all, you know, the descendants of the neurotic ones, right? That's us, okay? We're meant to have worries, and they're self-protective. They stop you walking out in traffic because you have the thought, hey, there might be a car coming, right? So you're meant to have them. And if you set yourself up thinking, I should never worry, you're going against evolution. You're setting yourself up for failure because we're evolved to have it. Okay, it's a natural and evolved system. However, if you can't cross the road because you're so worried about cars coming, then it's getting in the way of stuff. And once again, if your worries, your thoughts, your self-protective thoughts are getting in the way of you living your life, so you can't cross the road, for example, you can't come into hospital, you can't, I don't know, watch your kids play soccer, you can't sleep because of worries, then it's starting to get in the way of things. And that's where it's not just anxiety, but it's becoming disordered. It's anxiety disorder. And that's, once again, we need help. And as Ray's already pointed out, there's lots of things we can do that really do help. I'm going quick. Positivity. There's a lot to talk about positivity. And, you know, it's very helpful. Being positive in general is good, because if you think about it, being negative in general is depression. That's what we were talking about before. You don't want that. There's all these bad outcomes associated with depression, but also it's just horrible to have. But positivity itself in cancer can sometimes take on a bit of a nefarious attitude, in the sense that people suddenly feel they have to be positive about everything.
Right.
Yeah, you know that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the reality is there are negative things in life.
Yep.
People do cut you off in traffic. Nausea is not real positive. Do you know what I mean? The fact you have cancer is not a positive in itself. You might take positives from it. So once again, if you set yourself up to think, I have to be positive about every single thing, otherwise I'm being negative and that's wrong, you're actually setting yourself up for failure, because as we just talked about, we're evolved to be warned about the potential negatives.
Right.
Right? So what we say with positivity is it's good to be positive in general. I'm generally positive about my life, but I allow myself to get down today, this afternoon, about something that upsets me, something that makes me sad, someone that makes me mad. I don't know, dropping my sandwich or whatever happens. Yep. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, they're all fine. So general positivity is the thing to aim for, not global. And finally, coping. So we often get referrals for people who say they're just not coping. And I say, well, what do you mean? And they say, well, I get upset. And I say, what do you get upset about? And they get upset about very appropriate, upsetting things. But they also, you know, might be the carer and they're caring really successfully for a patient. They might be the patient, but they're, you know, doing all of their treatments and they're turning up for all their appointments. They might be, some of them still working, some of them are caring for children. They're doing all these things. So in psych, our definition now, the psychological definition of coping is dealing effectively with a difficult situation. So there's a few components to that, but the first thing to notice is it has to be a difficult situation. And what that means is if you're finding it hard, you could still be coping because that's a difficult situation. If you're finding it easy, you're not actually coping with anything. You're just living. You're just rolling along. So finding it hard is not a problem. Dealing effectively with a difficult situation. The other bit is dealing effectively. That means doing stuff that works. This is not dealing efficiently. This is definitely not dealing optimally. It's just effective. Effective just means, is it working? So it doesn't matter whether you're, you know, suddenly eating a lot of frozen meals if you're effectively feeding everyone or yourself. You know, it's not about the quality of it. It's about, does it work? Are you turning up? You got your pants on? You know, that's effective.
It's always a good sign.
Yeah, yes. You know, with me, it's a low bar sometimes. You know, but dealing effectively just means doing what works. And so you've got to really think to yourself, you know, and it's so harmful to say I'm not coping when really what I should be saying is I'm finding this hard. I'm finding this hard, but I am coping. And once again, if you find you're not doing any of those things that you really feel are just part of your everyday coping, that's when you ask for help.
Tell us about this picture.
Right.
What is it? It's kid stuck in a chair.
Do you know why I like this picture? Is there's a kid with his head stuck in a chair, and he looks the least stressed.
He does, doesn't he? He does.
And so I feel like that kid is coping. He's in a terrible predicament. His head is literally stuck in a school chair. They're trying to saw it out with a hacksaw. And he's there with a lollipop. He's happy. He's coping.
Okay.
And it's, I guess what I'm being is... Sorry?
It's a great
It is good, isn't it?
picture.
Yeah. So I feel like he's dealing effectively with a difficult situation. It's not a great situation, but he's coping. Final thing is changes. And actually, you guys have already mentioned quite a few of these, but there are a lot of changes we go through in our body, in our brain, that almost as we were saying earlier, it changes us. We become not different people, but we become new people, and it's an experience that changes. You know, it's a lot like to take something on the other extreme it's a lot like having a child, right? That changes you.
Absolutely.
You know, whether you're with your child today or not, you are different. And I think having a cancer diagnosis changes you. So there's all these changes. As I said, hormonal, cognitive, personality, emotional. There's a lot of detail to those that I don't know if it's worth going into now, but if you have questions, we can answer those. So that, I think, is all. So just to reiterate, not all stress is distressing, but if it is distressing, do something about it. Rule of thumb for depression is inappropriate sadness. Rule of thumb for anxiety is it getting in the way of stuff?
Nice.
Good to be positive, but just in a kind of general global sense. If you're doing what you need to do, you are coping, and there can be changes, particularly cognitive changes.
Excellent.
And that's me.
Very good.
Great.
Thank you. So we've got some questions here that we're going to address. And I think it was interesting watching the chat that was going on, because a lot of people are talking about...
A lot of good chat going on there.
Yeah, talking about waiting on test results and things. And funnily enough, our next webinar at the end of this month is about worrying about your cancer coming back. So you'll all get an invite. So that's what we'll be talking about. So we've got some questions up here that people posed when they registered. We've got a lot of questions. We often get medical questions, which obviously we can't address in this forum. If you do have specific medical questions, really the best thing to do is to go and see your treating oncologist or GP or whoever, whichever health professional you're seeing at the moment to get those medical questions answered. So first question, and I normally sort of read it out, and is it something we've already talked about? So what would you consider to be the most frequent reason for men to decline emotional and psychosocial support? Ray.
Yeah, ironically, the first thing I thought of was the degree of emotion I see at a sporting game, especially with, like I'm still getting over the 99 grand final and the emotion of my team losing in the last minute there. But
that was 19 years ago.
Yeah, I know. So the emotions inside the bloke, but often I find they often defer the emotion or defer the concern. The concern is, yes, I've got the cancer, but I'm worried about my family. Look after them first. I'm second. I'm okay, mate. I'm okay, mate. But also I think it's partly because, not wanting to get too deep about it, but there's a socialisation about we need to be strong. Men need to be the stronger side of things and carry other people and care for the others. And you can get to me later. I'll be right. I'll put up. But then I often find that, like something that you said, Ben, that if it persists, if it keeps going, then you need to do something about it. It just doesn't go away until you address it and put it on the table. And invariably it's the partner or the family will approach me and say, he's putting on a smiley face, but he's not doing well. And we need to step in at some level.
And it's tricky.
It is
very
tricky.
Very tricky territory. So, yeah, I don't know. Ben, you want to
Well,
add to
I mean,
that
I think it sort of does relate to the next question. Do you want to?
Yeah. So what are the panel's best tips on destigmatising mental health, including seeking and receiving mental health psychological support during and after cancer treatment? So, yeah.
So you're sort of following on from Ray, but also from your story about the builders. The way I look at this is us in health, we're just tradies. Do you know what I mean? We're just doing different trades. We've done apprenticeships and we just work, and you get really good at one thing and we all kind of work alongside each other like a work site and that sort of stuff. And I think, the way to approach the men who are declining is to point out, there are some things you just need a tradie to do. Do you know what I mean? And so if there's something wrong with your car, you have to take it eventually to a mechanic. If you can't fix it, you try yourself and it doesn't fix or sort out, you've got to go to a mechanic. And if that mechanic doesn't help you out, you don't go, well, that's all mechanics for me, I'm done. You go and find another mechanic, right? Do you know what I mean? And that's what I think you've got to understand about, we're all just tradies, and the first person they might come across, they might meet me and not like what I do, and that doesn't mean you give up on all people, because you still have a broken car.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So you've got to get it fixed.
Yeah.
And so I would say keep going, and that's probably my tip, is just, and I think it's probably not just psychosocial stuff. I think all kind of cancer professionals, in a sense, we're tradies, and you can discuss your health like a project in that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's very useful. Look, as a guy that's not in the health system but went through it, what I have noticed over the last 5 years is there is much less of a stigma associated with blokes like me talking about mental health than there was 5 years ago. I think the "Are you okay" thing that happened in the workplace was a good thing. And I notice, our business is still running, and I sit down with clients and they don't look great, and I say, hey, before we get into things, are you okay? 5 years ago that would have been like, what are you doing? Now it's kind of, it's not exactly normal, but it's certainly not abnormal, if you know what I mean. So I think we're living in a point of time where it's actually getting easier to talk about mental health for blokes than it was before.
Most definitely. And do you know what, though? I think you've had some uncomfortable conversations and realised they're really helpful. Yeah. And so maybe that's a beneficial thing for you too, and makes it easier for you then to ask. Yeah. And so I think that's, are you okay? And all of that is great. But I think also it's kind of duty sounds too strong. Our obligation maybe, but once you realise that these things are beneficial, it's our obligation to chat with our mates and ask them if they're all right. And,
Actually, you make a really good point, Ben. I do remember actually one of the conversations very quickly where somebody that I was speaking with in that mode of, hey, I don't think I'm doing that very well at the moment, they mentioned something called the Johari window. Very quickly, it means that they know something I don't know. And I said, really? And this guy said, well, look, could it be such and such? Is that kind of where you're coming from? I went, I didn't have any idea that could be what it is. Let me go and think about that. And it was that thing there that made me go and say to my wife and others, this is a good thing. We should start doing more of this.
So I was going to ask you, so in terms of it being a Sigma, at what point did you realise that it was okay?
What a great question. I think I realised at that moment when that guy was talking about the Janari window.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was more like, I'm going to sit in front of someone that doesn't know me. They're going to ask me a stack of questions. I'm going to feel uncomfortable. And they asked me to come back for 18 months. It's not like that at all. It was like, okay, tell me how you're feeling. Just talk about whatever you want to talk about. Do you have any questions? Hey, what about this? And I went, whoa, what did you just say?
Yeah.
You know something about this that I don't know. I think it was at that point there where I went, that is useful. We should do that. I should do this more. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I think that brings us back to the question is, as a bloke, I want to solve problems.
Yeah.
And so you once you saw, hey, this is a solution to something.
That was a good thing.
Yeah. And so, often talking with wives who are trying to get their husband in, that's what I say is, that's the answer is, they say, oh, he just needs to talk. And you say, well, what does he want to solve? What is it? That's the thing to focus on, not just talking for talking's sake.
Yes.
Because
what a great point.
No one likes that.
Yeah, what a great point. And hey, just to pick up on something you both said about, the importance of involving, partners, wives.
Yeah.
There is something though that you just said that's really important I want to emphasise, and that is that sometimes wives, I'm talking about mine of course, didn't quite realise that I wasn't ready to talk about some of the stuff yet. I wasn't making that obvious, and it would be great for you carers out there, just have an extra kind of couple of questions to see what our level of comfort is, because that would be unhelpful to come to a session and find, Matt doesn't want to talk. He really doesn't want to be here. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think a great point.
Yeah, and I think from the female perspective, we're always going to want you to talk to us about it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And like the lady was saying earlier, are you okay? But saying don't say that, say how you feeling.
How you feeling?
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So again, the next, breaking down the barriers, I kind of feel like we've addressed a lot of this, but it's still that barrier can still be up there where, and I guess again to the carers and whether it's wives or partners or whoever you are, it's having patience, I think.
Yes.
And when the man's ready to talk.
Yeah.
I guess, and
Absolutely.
or something drastic's going to happen where he won't get out of bed for days on time or whoever it is, but it's like that hitting that rock bottom. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think what I try to do is reframe talking. Thanks. That's right. This is my job, talking. Reframe talking as part of solving a problem, because I think a lot of blokes worry that it's just a talk fest for no purpose. And that's I think a useful way for all partners or carers to kind of do it. It's a real problem-solving kind of approach because you can fix stuff through talk.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And so Cheryl was saying earlier about welcoming men into support groups, and she was specifically talking about men that may have breast cancer, and a few people did answer a few questions about that and where there is information available. But I think that whole subject of support groups and men taking part in support groups, apart from we know there are benefits, but it's like, they probably don't want to do that because, as you were just saying, we're not solving problems, we're just sitting around chatting.
Yeah. See, I'm happy for those guys to come in and know, come in at your comfort level.
Yeah.
Okay, you can pass if you don't want to engage and talk and stuff. But by the same token, it's not just a warm and fuzzy moment. It's just an opportunity to come and try something different because you've come then, and what Ben talked about, the persistence of something, if it keeps going, that you've tried what you've done before, it hasn't actually turned much around.
Yeah.
the leap of faith.
Try something
We'll
else.
sit in this group. I don't want to be here. I'm thinking about the football. I've got the cricket on my phone.
Yeah.
Okay, but it seems
Give
all
it a
right.
go.
It seems all right.
Yeah. Because, yeah.
But the support groups are different when you go to, say, a men's specific one to mixed or women only. They are a very different sort of vibe, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that seems to make, there's one group I attend sometimes, and they do stuff. That might be, they're still talking, but it's
men?
Yeah, the men one. Yeah. They'll be fixing something, or and it's a lot like Men's Shed, I suppose.
say
It's
Men's
not a
Shed.
Men's Shed, but it's a lot like that. They'll have some sort of project that they're working on, a charity wagon or something, and that's how they do
great.
it. Yeah, and I think it frees people up a bit, makes them more comfortable. Yeah. Sorry, can I?
Yeah, go on.
Someone asked about rural areas.
Yes.
Oh, that's the question on here.
That's
Sorry.
the question there.
That's a great
Yeah.
question.
Important. Yes, Anne, it is important. And we will talk about it.
Sorry.
Because no, it's fine. We can go a few minutes over. So you're getting counselling, living in a rural area. Any solutions?
I'm
We can
thinking
offer
you're a rural
one.
man.
Yeah, so
Actually, boy, so I'm looking at you.
so we actually think Newcastle's a city, but
Yeah.
but our area goes right up to the Queensland border, and so we're all based in Newcastle though. So we've invested a lot into telehealth and different systems. So there a lot of areas have some form of telehealth. Ours, a newer one, is quite good in that you can do it on any computer or phone or tablet that just has a camera, and we're trying to use that as much as we can. And we were discussing before, it's not as good as being live, but it might be better than driving 10 hours.
Yeah.
So it's it's coming, and the difficulty sometimes with telehealth is getting initially linked in. I believe the Cancer Council has info, don't they?
We
that
do.
you can ring in.
We have telephone support groups and
But I think
various
you also have support
online
groups
communities.
about supports locally too, don't you?
Support groups about support.
So you have info about local supports as well. So
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's a way of getting in touch with who might offer
Absolutely, yeah.
telehealth
And another idea about rural and remote, I'm part of the Cancer Council Peer Support Service. I live on the south coast of New South Wales, and one of the guys I'm talking with currently, he lives in the Northern Territory.
Yeah.
And we're on the phone and we're talking about stuff, and he had the same sort of cancer that I did, and that one-on-one over the telephone can be incredibly enriching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of services that cancer councils all across Australia offer, and it's we'll go to the next slide. There's the number 13 11 20, so no advertising, but you can ring that number and say, I live wherever, is there a support group near me, and they can look it up and let you know. And there's lots of other services that we do offer. So I think that might be it. This has been fantastic panel tonight, and really great conversation, and lots of interesting, and by the comments, everyone's, I think, found everything that you've been saying really useful. I like this knocking.
The knocking, that'll stay with me, that one.
I'm going to go home and do that to my husband.
That's right. Okay.
And thank you all very much, and thank you to everybody for tuning in. We've had some great comments, and as we said, we'll send the recording to you. I always forget this, but there is a little survey at the end which will take you a couple of minutes. Please take part. It just helps us inform our future webinars. Are we hitting the mark for you or not? If we're not, tell us about it, because we want to know, because we're going to continue with these webinars. So I did mention the next one is going to be about worrying about your cancer coming back. That'll be the last Thursday of this month, which I think, can't think what the date is now, 29th of March or something like that. But you'll all get an invitation to it. So we will send you the slides, we'll send you the recording of the webinar, and we'll also send you some information of resources that you can access. So thank you all again, and thank you, Matt.
No,
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Keep well.
Good night.
Bye-bye.